My wife barely acknowledged I existed at her best friend's wedding. And I do not mean she was just distracted or caught up in conversations. I mean she acted like I was some stranger who brushed past her on the sidewalk. The whole thing was strange enough, but the moment that truly blindsided me came from the bride herself. During the ceremony, she looked straight at me, leaned forward, and whispered loud enough for people nearby to hear, "I wish I had married a man like you." Let me walk you through how this whole mess unfolded. We showed up at the church a good 30 minutes early because my wife, Rachel, insisted she needed to help with last-minute preparations. I figured that was fine. Supporting friends is normal. What I did not expect was for Rachel to drop me the second we stepped inside. She rushed off to the bridal party without a "see you later" or even "find us a seat." So there I was, standing in the entrance holding her purse, her jacket, and what felt like my pride, while she disappeared into pre-wedding chaos. When guests began arriving and asking where she was, I had to admit that my own wife had vanished somewhere in the building. The ceremony was beautiful. At least, it would have been if I had not been sitting by myself in the third row like some random +1. Rachel was up front with the others, but every time I tried to catch her eye, she stared right past me like I was part of the church decorations. When the bride, Madison, walked down the aisle, she locked eyes with me and gave me a warm smile. Not a polite 1-second smile. A real one. One that lasted a little too long. But the moment that stunned me came during the vows. The groom, Aaron, was stumbling over his words and looked like he might faint. Madison's smile was turning tighter by the second. She glanced at me again, shook her head just a little, and mouthed something. The older lady beside me gasped loudly. Madison had whispered, "I wish I had married him instead." A ripple went through the first few rows. People turned to stare at me. Even Rachel finally looked in my direction, but only to glare at me like I had personally ruined the ceremony. Madison's mother covered her mouth, while the groom's family remained oblivious. After the ceremony, during the photo session, Rachel continued acting like I was hired help. "Hold this," she said, shoving her bouquet at me. "Move over there," she ordered, pointing me toward some spot where I would not end up in any pictures. When the photographer asked for a picture of all the couples, she walked away from me and stood next to her cousin's husband instead. That was when Madison, still in her wedding dress, marched straight toward me in front of everyone. "You know," she said loudly, "you are probably the only man here who actually understands how to treat a woman." She looked right at Rachel, then back at me. Some people do not appreciate what they have until it is gone. Rachel's face went white, then red. She stormed over, grabbed my arm hard enough to hurt, and whispered, "What did you say to her?" I stayed calm. Nothing she did not already know. That answer hit Rachel harder than shouting ever could. She knew exactly what Madison meant, and she knew it was true. As the reception approached, I could practically feel Rachel panicking. The bride had just complimented me publicly and called out her behavior, and half the wedding party had witnessed it. But instead of apologizing, Rachel doubled down. On our way to the reception hall, she said, "You better not embarrass me tonight." I stopped walking. "Embarrass you?" I asked. "That happened about 4 hours ago when you pretended I did not exist." Guests slowed around us, sensing tension. "The difference is," I added, "I am done pretending it does not bother me." She forced a laugh, but her voice cracked. "You are being dramatic. This is her special day, not yours." "You are right," I said, adjusting my tie. "It is her day, and she has already made it clear who she respects and who she does not." I gestured toward the doors. "After you. Let us see how the rest of this goes." When we walked inside, I could feel the atmosphere shift. Madison was watching us from the head table. Her new husband had no idea that the reception was about to turn into something none of us would forget. Rachel had treated me like I was nothing all day, assuming it would never catch up to her. She was about to learn how wrong she was. The hall buzzed with celebration, but beneath it all, I felt the tension from earlier. Rachel went directly to the open bar, leaving me to find our seats alone. By that point, I was starting to notice a pattern, and honestly, I was getting tired of being treated like an extra at every event we went to. Our table was close to the dance floor, giving me a clear view of the head table. Madison kept glancing over at us while her new husband stayed wrapped up in a conversation with his groomsmen, totally clueless that his bride had basically said she wished she had married someone else. I had to give her credit. Her timing was incredible, if nothing else. Rachel eventually came back with 2 drinks. She slid one toward me, without even glancing up. "Try to look like you are having fun," she muttered, already scanning the room for someone more entertaining than her own husband. "I will do my best to control my overwhelming excitement," I said, taking a sip. Though it is tough to enjoy myself when my own wife acts like I have some kind of contagious illness. She rolled her eyes. "You are being dramatic. I am just talking to people." Before I could respond, the best man wandered over to our table. He was tall, athletic, and very aware of his own charm. He flashed a smile at Rachel that lasted a few beats longer than a polite one. "Mind if I borrow your lovely wife for a dance?" Rachel shot out of her chair as if it had suddenly caught fire. "I would love to," she said, not even bothering to look at me or acknowledge me. I watched them on the dance floor. Rachel was laughing at everything he said, really laughing, the kind of laugh I had not seen from her all day. The same woman who had barely spoken a word to me was acting like a schoolgirl at her first prom. The people seated around us noticed too. A few exchanged uncomfortable looks. The elderly woman beside me leaned in and asked softly, "Honey, is everything all right?" "Everything is perfect," I said with a smile that felt glued on. "My wife is simply expressing her interpretation of wedding vows. You know, the loving, honoring, and cherishing part." I motioned toward the dance floor where she was almost pressed against the best man. Very modern version. When the song ended, they did not come back to the table. Instead, they wandered over to the bar. Rachel ordered another drink and kept chatting like they were sharing a private joke. The best man rested his hand on the small of her back, and she did not move away even a fraction. That was when I decided I had seen enough. I walked over and stepped right between them. "Having fun?" I asked Rachel in a calm voice. She jumped a little, clearly not expecting me to interrupt her little flirtation session. "We were just talking," she said defensively. "Talking?" I repeated with a slow nod. "Is that what we are calling it?" I turned to the best man. "Thanks for keeping my wife entertained. I will take it from here." He looked suddenly uncomfortable. "No problem, man. Just being friendly." "Oh, I noticed how friendly you were," I said with a tight smile. "But she is married, in case you missed the ring." I pointed to her wedding band. Though I get the confusion considering how she has been acting. Rachel's face burned with anger. "You are embarrassing yourself," she hissed. "Am I?" I asked loudly, loud enough that several people nearby stopped talking. "Because from what I have seen, you are the one embarrassing our marriage today." Other guests began turning their heads to watch. Rachel grabbed my arm, trying to pull me away, but I did not move an inch. "What is wrong with you?" she snapped. I let out a sharp laugh. "What is wrong with me? That is interesting. I am not the one who has been treating their spouse like they barely exist since the moment we walked in." I stared straight into her eyes. "You want the truth? I am done pretending this is normal." The best man cleared his throat. "Maybe I should go." "Good idea," I said without breaking eye contact with Rachel. "This conversation is about to get very real." Rachel's temper snapped. "You are being insecure and pathetic," she practically shouted, her voice carrying across half the reception hall. "I cannot even talk to people without you acting like some jealous child." Her words hung in the air, heavy and ugly. People all around us went quiet. I felt something cold settle inside me, but I kept my voice steady. "Insecure and pathetic," I repeated. "Those are strong words coming from someone who has been throwing herself at every man here, except her own husband." Her mouth opened, but absolutely nothing came out. "You want to talk about pathetic?" I continued, my voice carrying further than I intended. "Pathetic is ignoring your spouse for an entire wedding. Pathetic is flirting with other men while your husband sits alone. Pathetic is treating your marriage like it is some kind of burden." Suddenly, Madison appeared beside us, her face red with anger, but none of it was aimed at me. "What on earth is happening here?" she demanded, staring straight at Rachel. Rachel tried to pull herself together, lifting her chin like nothing was wrong. "It's nothing," she said quickly. "Just a misunderstanding." Madison's eyes narrowed. "A misunderstanding?" She glanced around at the guests who were openly watching. "The only misunderstanding here is you thinking it is acceptable to treat your husband like trash at my wedding." Her voice grew sharper, louder. "I have been watching you all day," she continued. "And honestly, I am disgusted." Rachel's face drained of color. "You do not understand what is happening." "Oh, I understand perfectly," Madison snapped. "I see a good man who came here to support you, and you have spent the entire day tearing him down." She turned her attention to me. and I see a man who deserves a whole lot better than this." The reception had gone almost silent. Even the disc jockey had lowered the music, picking up on the tension filling the room. Rachel looked around desperately, realizing she was now the center of attention for all the wrong reasons. "This is supposed to be your day," she said weakly to Madison. "We should not be causing drama." Madison stepped closer, her expression fierce. "You are right. This is my day, and on my day, I refuse to watch a good man get disrespected by someone who does not value him." She looked Rachel up and down. "You want to act single? Then go be single. But do not bring that behavior to my celebration." I gently placed my hand on Madison's arm. "Thank you," I said quietly. "But this is something between me and my wife." Madison nodded, but before she walked away, she gave Rachel one last look. "You have no idea what you are throwing away," she said. "But do not worry. Some of us recognize quality when we see it." With that, she returned to the head table. Rachel rounded on me instantly, eyes blazing. "Are you happy now? You ruined her wedding with your jealousy." I looked at her for a long moment before giving a small smile. "My jealousy? You have some nerve." I straightened my jacket. "But you are right about one thing. The evening is definitely ruined. The real question is, what are we going to do about it?" The way Rachel stared at me made it clear she had no idea what I was thinking. But I did. And what I had planned was going to be unforgettable. The reception carried on, but everything felt different. Rachel hurried off to the bathroom, probably to recover from being called out by the bride in front of half the room. I returned to our table. Suddenly, everyone else seemed deeply interested in their plates, avoiding eye contact. I had just finished eating when I felt someone standing beside me. I looked up to see Madison again. She had left the head table, and her expression was serious, almost determined. "Can we talk?" she asked quietly. Privately, I glanced toward the bathroom, where Rachel had disappeared 10 minutes earlier. Of course. She led me to a quiet corner near the garden entrance, away from the noise and chatter. Up close, I could see the stress in her eyes despite her flawless makeup. "I owe you an apology," she said softly. "For what?" "For staying quiet for so long." She shook her head. "You defended me back there, but I should have spoken up sooner." She looked back toward the reception hall. "I have watched the way she treats you for years, and I kept my mouth shut because it was not my place. But tonight, on my wedding day, seeing her humiliate you like that, I could not stay silent." I studied her carefully. "You have been watching this for years?" She nodded. "Every get-together, every party, every dinner. You show up, you are polite to everyone. You help wherever you can, and she acts like you are a burden she is forced to carry around." She paused, then continued. "Do you know what you did the moment you arrived today?" I shook my head. "You held the door for 3 older guests. You helped carry chairs for the setup crew. You complimented my mother on her dress. All before the ceremony even started." Her eyes shone with emotion. "My husband spent that same time complaining about his shoes and asking when the bar would open." Her words hung between us like a heavy truth neither of us wanted to say out loud. "That is not really my business," I said quietly. "Isn't it?" She stepped closer. "When I see how a real man behaves, how he treats people with respect, it absolutely becomes my business." She nodded toward the reception. "Half the women in there noticed it too. And the other half are wondering why your wife cannot see what she has." Something shifted between us then, something neither of us could pretend not to feel. "What are you saying?" I asked. "I am saying some people spend their whole lives searching for what you bring to a relationship, and others are too blind to appreciate it when it is right in front of them." She looked me directly in the eyes. "I made a mistake today. I married someone who takes everything for granted instead of someone who understands what truly matters." Her words landed with surprising weight. "You have been married for only 3 hours, I reminded her. "And I already know I married the wrong man," she said without hesitation. "I realized at the moment I saw how your wife treated you, and how you handled it with more grace than most men ever could." She reached out and touched my arm gently. "You deserve someone who sees your worth." I glanced back toward the reception hall. From where I stood, I could see Rachel had returned from the bathroom and was already back at the bar, talking closely with the best man again, like nothing had happened. "And what exactly are you suggesting?" I asked. Madison's expression was calm but deliberate. "I am suggesting you do not have to put up with being treated that way. You have choices." Her voice never wavered. "And if you ever decide to explore those choices, You should know there are people who would feel lucky to have your attention. The message was unmistakable, but I wanted to be sure. Are we talking in theory here? Her smile softened, and for the first time all day, it looked completely sincere. No, we are talking about reality. Your reality, my reality, and the truth that life is too short to spend with someone who does not appreciate you. Before I could answer, she continued, I am heading back inside. In about 15 minutes, they will start the traditional toasts from friends and family. She gave me a deliberate look. Anyone can request the microphone if they have something meaningful to say about marriage or relationships. A slow smile spread across my face as her meaning clicked. That is an interesting tradition, I said. It is, she replied, especially when someone has something important to say about knowing the real worth of a partner. She started walking back toward the reception but turned to look at me once more. Oh, and just so you know, I will be listening very closely. I watched her rejoin the crowd, her words replaying in my mind. She had just given me the perfect chance to speak the truth with her full support. Rachel had assumed she could walk all over me without consequences. What she had not counted on was that other people had been watching her behavior, too. When I returned inside, Rachel was still glued to the best man, their conversation looking even more cozy than before. When she noticed me, she rolled her eyes. Where have you been? She asked, sounding like she barely cared. Having a very enlightening conversation about marriage, I said. About what mutual respect actually looks like. The best man shifted uncomfortably and excused himself fast, leaving Rachel glaring at me. Are you planning to spend the entire night making passive-aggressive comments? She snapped. I smiled at her, and something in my expression made her take a step back. Actually, I said, I was thinking of making my comments a little more direct. Her eyebrows drew together. What is that supposed to mean? I motioned toward the head table where Madison was seated, watching us with clear interest. It means sometimes the best way to deal with a problem is to shine a bright light on it so everyone can see it clearly. Rachel's eyes narrowed. Do not you dare cause a scene. A scene? I laughed. Rachel, the scene started hours ago when you treated your own husband like unpaid help in front of 200 people. I straightened my tie. I'm just going to make sure everyone understands what they have been watching. The color drained from her face as she realized exactly what I intended to do. You would not, she whispered. I looked her straight in the eyes. Watch me. I walked toward the disc jockey booth, where a line of people waiting to make toasts had started to form. Behind me, I could feel her panic like heat on my back. From across the room, Madison spotted me and raised her champagne glass slightly. Just enough to be noticed, but not enough to draw attention. To everyone else it looked like a polite gesture. To me, it felt like encouragement. Rachel had spent the entire day reminding me how little she valued our marriage. Now it was time to show her what happens when a man who has been quiet for too long finally speaks up. The microphone was only 3 people away. When it was my turn, the disc jockey handed me the microphone with an easy smile. Make it heartfelt, he said, completely unaware he was handing me the setup for the most honest speech of the night. I stepped forward and looked over the crowd. Conversations died instantly. Every face turned toward me. Rachel stood frozen near the bar, pale and wide-eyed, realizing she had no way to stop what was coming. At the head table, Madison leaned forward, eyes locked on mine, full of expectation. I cleared my throat. Good evening, everyone. I began, my voice carrying clearly through the speakers. For those who do not know me, I am here with my wife as guests of this beautiful bride. I gestured toward Madison's table. And I have to say, today has been incredibly educational. A few guests chuckled softly. Rachel took a step toward me, but I lifted a hand, stopping her in her tracks. I have learned a lot about marriage today, I continued, just by watching the people in this room. I have learned about respect, about partnership, about knowing the real worth of the person standing beside you. I paused, letting the silence stretch. It is amazing how much a wedding can reveal about what people truly believe marriage should look like. The room went completely still. Everyone knew this was not going to be a typical toast. For example, I continued, I have noticed that some people believe marriage means standing beside your partner proudly, showing them support, treating them like they matter. I looked right at Rachel. And then there are people who treat marriage like some kind of performance act, where you pretend your own spouse is invisible. A wave of uncomfortable shifting moved through the crowd. Rachel's jaw dropped. Now, I do not want to point fingers, I went on, letting a small smile touch my face. But I have seen some truly impressive behavior today. Like a wife who managed to go through an entire wedding ceremony without acknowledging that her husband even existed. That takes dedication, real commitment to indifference. Several heads turned toward Rachel. She looked like she wanted the floor to open up beneath her. And let us not forget the remarkable talent of flirting with every man at the reception except the one you came with. That is advanced-level disrespect. I lifted my glass slightly. But here is what really stood out to me today. I turned toward Madison. She was staring at me with absolute focus. I have had the privilege of seeing a bride who knows the difference between a man who deserves respect and one who does not. A woman who recognizes true character when she sees it. My voice strengthened. And someone who is not afraid to call out behavior that falls short of what marriage should be. Madison's smile lit up her whole face as she raised her glass in return. So my toast tonight, I said, is to clarity, to those moments when you finally see things exactly as they are. I looked back toward Rachel, who was shoving her way through the crowd toward me. To recognizing someone's real priorities, I said, and believing them the first time they show you. Rachel reached the front of the crowd. Stop it, she yelled. You are humiliating yourself. Still holding the microphone, I turned toward her voice. Humiliating myself? I said calmly. That is interesting. I faced the crowd again. Ladies and gentlemen, my wife just accused me of humiliating myself, simply because I am speaking honestly about respect in a marriage. A ripple of nervous laughter spread through the room. But she is absolutely right about one thing, I said. Someone is being humiliated tonight. I paused, letting the moment sit. The question, I continued, is whether it is the man asking for basic respect, or the woman who has spent the entire day proving to 200 witnesses why she does not deserve it. Gasps exploded throughout the hall. Rachel's face flashed white, then red, then white again. You see, I said, here is what I have learned about marriage today. It is not about finding someone perfect. It is about being with someone who values what you bring into their life. I looked at Madison again. Someone who understands that good men are not easy to find. And when you find one, you do not treat him like he is disposable. Madison rose from the head table, lifting her glass even higher. To recognizing true worth, she called out. Several guests joined in, raising their glasses. Exactly, I said. To recognizing true worth. And to having the courage to stop settling for people who take that worth for granted. My voice carried clearly through the room. Because life is far too short to spend it with someone who treats your love like an inconvenience. Rachel finally broke through the crowd and lunged for the microphone. Give me that, she demanded. I pulled it back just out of reach. Oh, now you want to talk? I said. How refreshing. You have ignored me all day, but suddenly I am worth speaking to because there is a microphone involved. Several guests laughed outright at that, unable to hide it anymore. Here is the thing about respect, I continued, keeping the microphone away from her grasp. You cannot demand it. You earn it. And you cannot fake it when 200 people have spent the last 6 hours watching you treat your own spouse like a background prop. Rachel tried again to grab the microphone, nearly stumbling. You are ruining everything, she cried. I handed the microphone back to the disc jockey and spoke loudly enough for everyone to hear. I am not ruining anything, I said. I am simply refusing to pretend that being treated like garbage is normal. I glanced around the room. And clearly, I am not the only one who noticed. That was when Madison stepped down from the head table, the long train of her wedding dress trailing behind her like she was walking straight into a duel. She reached us and looked directly at Rachel. You know what is ruined? Madison said, her voice carrying across the room. Watching a good man get treated like he is worthless at my wedding by someone who should be grateful to have him. Then she turned to me. And you know what is beautiful? She continued. Watching a man finally stand up and demand the respect he deserves. The room erupted with whispers and murmurs. Some guests nodded in agreement. Others simply stared in shock at the unfolding drama. Rachel looked around frantically, realizing the entire room had turned on her. This is insane, she gasped. You are all insane, Rachel shouted. I smiled at her, feeling lighter than I had in years. No, I said. This is called clarity. This is what happens when someone finally decides they are done accepting the unacceptable. I straightened my jacket one more time. And this, I added calmly, is only the beginning. The look in Rachel's eyes told me she was finally realizing her behavior had consequences, one she never imagined. But it was too late for understanding, too late for excuses. The truth was out in the open, and everyone in that room now knew exactly who she was. The only question left was, what was she going to do next? Rachel's panic twisted into rage as she saw the stares, judgment, pity, disappointment. Instead of stopping and reflecting, she went in the exact opposite direction. "You want the truth?" she screamed, her voice cracking. "Fine. The truth is I am tired of pretending I am happy with someone so boring and predictable." She threw her arm toward me. "You think you are so perfect? You are pathetic." The silence that followed was so complete, it felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. Even the band froze, their instruments hanging in the air. 200 guests watched in shock as she spiraled. "All day," she went on, "people have been telling me how lucky I am, how wonderful he is, how I should appreciate him more." She let out a bitter, ugly laugh. "But none of you have to live with him. None of you have to pretend mediocrity is enough." I stayed calm, simply watching her unravel. Madison stepped a little closer to me, her expression turning from surprise to something protective, like she was ready to shield me if she had to. An older gentleman from the groom's side stood up. "Young lady," he said firmly, "you should stop talking before you say something you will regret." "Regret?" Rachel barked, spinning toward him. "The only thing I regret is not saying this sooner." She turned back to the crowd. "You all think he is so wonderful? Then one of you can have him." That was the moment the bride's mother stood up, her voice slicing through the chaos like steel. "In 40 years of marriage," she said coldly, "I have never seen such an appalling display of disrespect." She stared directly at Rachel. "Your husband just gave a beautiful speech about valuing a partner, and your response is to prove every single word he said." People all around us began standing, murmuring their agreement. Rachel was losing the room completely, but she was too far gone to stop herself. "You do not understand," she cried, tears spilling down her cheeks. "I never wanted a marriage this ordinary. I wanted excitement, passion." Madison stepped forward, her voice controlled and sharp. "You want passion?" she said. "Try appreciating what you have before someone else does." She looked Rachel up and down. "Because from where I am standing, you just threw away something precious because you were too shallow to recognize its value." Rachel whipped around, glaring at Madison. "Oh, please," she snapped. "Like your marriage is going to be any different. In 5 years you will be just as bored as I am." A collective gasp rippled through the room. Insulting the bride at her own wedding. That was a line you could not come back from. Madison's eyes flashed. "The difference," she said, stepping closer, "is that I know how to recognize a good man when I see one. And I also know not to humiliate him in front of a crowd while practically throwing myself at half the men in the room like some desperate teenager." A few of her bridesmaids moved closer, not quite intervening, but ready if things escalated. Rachel looked around, seeing she was hopelessly outnumbered, but her pride was still louder than her common sense. "At least I am honest about what I want," she snapped back. "Honest," I finally said, my voice carrying across the room. "You call this honesty?" I let out a short laugh, one without any humor. "Honesty would have been telling me years ago that you were unhappy, so we could work on it. This is not honesty. This is cruelty disguised as truth." Madison nodded strongly. "Exactly," she said. "There is a difference between honesty and destruction. What you are doing right now is not honesty. It is just mean." More guests chimed in from around the room. "I have never seen anything like this," a woman whispered. "That poor man," someone else murmured. "How long has he put up with this?" "She should be ashamed," another voice added. Rachel looked around wildly, realizing the entire room, an entire wedding, had turned against her. "You are all crazy," she cried. "You do not know what it is like." The bride's cousin, a woman in her 50s, stood up and looked Rachel squarely in the eyes. "We know exactly what it is like to be married to a good man," she said. "The difference is, most of us are grateful for it." The words hit Rachel like physical blows. She scanned the room one last time, finding nothing but shaking heads and disappointment. "Fine," she said, her voice cracking. "You all think he is so perfect? Then keep him." She started walking toward the exit, then turned back over her shoulder. "But do not come crying to me when you realize how boring perfect really is." Just as Rachel reached the exit, Madison called after her one last time. The only boring thing here, she said, her voice sharp and steady, is watching someone walk away from the kind of love most people spend their whole lives searching for. Rachel stopped at the doorway. Her shoulders slumped, and for a moment, it looked like she finally understood the weight of what she had done. But instead of apologizing or trying to fix anything, she lifted her chin, pulled her shoulders back, and walked straight out of the reception hall. The silence that followed felt like the entire room was holding one long breath. Then, slowly, the bride's mother began to clap, and one by one, the entire room joined her, an overwhelming wave of people applauding in my direction. They were not celebrating the drama. They were showing support. They were showing me support. Madison approached, tears shining in her eyes. "I am so sorry you had to endure that," she said. "But I am not sorry that everyone now knows exactly what kind of man you are." She turned to the crowd. "I want you all to notice something," she said, her voice rising. "This man just showed us what dignity looks like under pressure, what grace looks like when someone tries to tear you down, and what happens when a good person finally stops putting up with bad treatment." The applause grew louder. People were standing, some even cheering openly. Madison looked at me with an expression I could not quite name. "You know what breaks my heart?" she said loud enough for all to hear. She had everything she needed right in front of her, and she was too blind to see it. She paused, locking eyes with me. "But someone else will not make that mistake." Her meaning was unmistakable. Everyone in that room heard it. The bride had just publicly made her feelings clear, on her own wedding night, with 200 witnesses. I looked around at the faces full of support, at Madison standing beside me like an ally, and at the doorway where Rachel had walked out of my life. For the first time in years, I knew exactly where I stood, and it was a far better place than the one I had walked into that morning. The reception continued, but nothing was the same. Guests came up to me all night, offering kind words, sharing what they had noticed about Rachel's behavior over the years. Turns out, everyone had seen the cracks. They just felt it was not their place to say anything until now. Madison stayed close to me the rest of the evening, making her support impossible to miss. When the final dance was announced, she walked toward me, right in front of her new husband. "I have something I want to say," she told the remaining guests as she took the microphone again. The room fell silent. "Today was supposed to be about love and commitment," she said. "But instead, I learned what those words truly mean by watching someone show them under the worst circumstances." She looked right at me. I saw a man hold on to dignity when he was pushed to his limits. I saw grace instead of anger, strength when most people would have fallen apart. That is the kind of person I should have been looking for all along. Her husband finally realized what was happening, but he was far too late to stop it. "I am ending this marriage," she said to the stunned crowd, "because I refuse to settle for less when I finally understand what more looks like." 3 months later, my divorce was finalized. Rachel tried to reconcile twice, but I had already learned my lesson about giving second chances to someone who never valued what she had. 9 months after that unforgettable wedding, I proposed to the woman who saw my worth when it mattered most, the woman who had the courage to admit her mistake and choose better for herself. Our own wedding was small, simple, and filled with people who understood what real love looks like. People who had seen one marriage collapse under disrespect and another begin with mutual appreciation. Obviously, Rachel was not invited. But I heard from friends that she spent the entire day posting bitter comments online about how certain people steal happiness from others. She still did not understand something simple. You cannot steal what was never genuine to begin with. The best form of revenge is not hurting someone back. It is creating a life so good without them that their absence becomes the greatest gift they ever gave you. And that is exactly what happened. Rachel gave me the greatest gift of all. She showed me I deserved better. And then she stepped out of the way so I could finally find it.